He allowed us that opportunity, realizing that he didn't have to do it, but he did.
Yes.
For that, we say thank you.
Thank you.
Got a good lesson this morning, and going back to the first book of the Bible, Genesis. We're going to see an uncle and a nephew. We're going to look at Abram, better known later as Abraham, and his nephew Lot. And how they both sort of went different paths, and how Abram made a mistake following his nephew Lot instead of he was separating them. And we're going to see how it cost both of them.
All right.
Our lesson this morning comes from Abraham's 13th chapter, verses 8 through 18. King James Version reads as follows. And Abram said unto Lot, let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdsmen and thy herdsmen, for we be brethren. Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. If thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. And Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere. Before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. Then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves the one from the other. Abram dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelleth in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent toward Sodom. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. And the Lord said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him, lift up thine eyes and look from the place where thou art northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. And I will make the seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. Arise, walk through the land in the length of it and in the breadth of it, for I will give it unto thee. Then Abram removed his tent and came and dwelt in the plain of Meribah, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto the Lord. Our key verse, so Abram moved his tent and came and settled by the oaks of Mamre, which are at Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. 13, 8 through 18, King James Version. Now we offer motion, we hear our theme from Mr. Perry.
Morning, class.
Good morning.
Intro. In 1964, the United States implemented a draft whereby individuals were required to serve the armed forces involuntarily. Many individuals who opposed the Vietnam War on moral, political, and personal grounds chose to resist the draft. One notable person who refused the draft was heavyweight champion boxer Muhammad Ali. He objected on religious grounds, which is characterized as a conscientious objection. As a result, he lost his title and was suspended from boxing. However, in 1971, the Supreme Court unanimously overturned his conviction for evading the draft, recognizing his status as a consensus objector. In 1973, the voluntary draft ended in the United States, transitioned to an all-voluntary military. Today, when people join the military, they do so out of a sense of duty, patriotism, obedience. It is a new life chapter with certain challenges ahead. Often, when we ask why they join, the answer is akin to a commitment to a greater purpose in contributing to the security of society. As we reflect on the stories of those who have served in the armed forces, whether go through the draft or as a volunteers, we see a common thread of duty, sacrifice, and commitment to a greater cause. In a similar vein, we find ourselves called by God to a different kind of duty. This calling, while not tied to the armed forces, demand no less commitment, and often requires a similar willingness to step into the unknown. God's calling in our lives is a summons to a higher purpose and an invitation to participate in his divine plan. In our lesson, we explore the call of Abram, his response, and God's purpose in his call.
Thank you, Mr. Press, for the introduction. We all remember Muhammad Ali and the stance he took, which wasn't popular back then, and how he suffered for that. He was stripped of his title, wasn't allowed to box anymore, but he stood fast in his conviction. And finally, the Supreme Court overruled it, but it took away 3 of his major years away from him. Sometimes it cost us to take a stand.
All right.
Sometimes it costs us. We're going to see here how, by just taking the wrong path, how Abram got stalled by his nephew Lot. It goes on to let us know that in the narrative of Genesis 13, Abram began to call for a new land, his home. It goes on to let us know he probably had projects on his mind and things that he wanted to improve. But he took the time to thank God and claim a space as sacred, meaning set apart for God's purpose. It goes on to say, for generation after generation, the descendants of Abram, renamed Abraham in Genesis 17:5, would tell his stories and would refer to this place. Since the day Adam and Eve were expelled from Eden, the fact of humanity's sinfulness has been nothing new in any era. It was and is a persistent problem. Thus it was left up to God to restore creation. That's what was happening in this lesson here. Goes on to let us know, we're going to look at verse 8, Abram's offer. And the whole theme of it was to avoid arguing. And listen what it said. And Abraham said unto Lot, let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdsman and thy herdsman, for we be brethren. And they was uncle and nephew. And Abram was pleading a lot, because they both had a lot of cattle. The land was rich and fertile, but it wasn't enough space for two to exist with all their herds. It goes and let us know to be a herdsman was a common occupation in the ancient Near East. The success of this land depended upon the land's ability to provide. The territory of Canaan and the Jordan River Valley was quite suitable for such an occupation. The Old Testament describes this land about 20 times as flowing with milk and honey. It goes on to let us know the problem here was what might be called too much of a good thing. Despite the land's abundance, Abram and Lot had too much livestock for the area to support it. Thus, the herdsmen came into competition for a fixed set of resources. To prevent any strife or any trouble that could have endangered their herdsmen, Abram suggested a resolution predicted on their shared kinship. In other words, that they were kinfolks. This instance is not the first time in Genesis that competition between close relatives presents itself. Consider Cain and Abel. We know that story. Then we know Esau and Jacob, two brothers. Laban and Jacob. So you see, there's always been strife between family at times. This is what verse 9 says, to avoid crowding. It says here, is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. That's Abram talking to Lot. If thou wilt take the left hand, even I will go to the right. If thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. You see, it's easy for us to imagine the two men standing on a high elevation as Abram makes this offer to Lot. He's looking out over. He's got a good view. And he's saying, if I go one way, you go the other. So it won't be no strife. The offer assures that they will separate, but Abram risked a great deal by allowing Lot his choice. The text says nothing of God's direction in the affair. But listen now. But Lot's self-interest will lead to his unraveling after his departure from the land of Canaan. First of all, Lot went to the wrong place. He went to Sodom, close to Sodom. It goes on to let us know, we may wonder if Lot is counted as part of Abram's father's house, Genesis 12 and 1. It goes on to say, the text merely says Lot went with him as Abram departed for Canaan. Thus we do not know whether Lot accompanied Abram by invitation to do so, if he merely was a tag-along party. In other words, whether he was invited or not. It's been said that there are two ways to learn things, through wisdom and through experience. Wisdom is when you learn from the mistake of others. Experience is when you learn from your own mistakes. Lot's choice eventually resulted in the latter. In the latter. In other words, Lot learned from his own mistakes. Verse 10 talks about his choice, Lot's choice. And Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan. It was well watered everywhere. For the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. It goes on to say, much like the present day, access to water was a requirement for survival in ancient times. Water was so important in ancient times. No water means no livestock in ancient times. All wells had to be dug by hand. Pastor, we remember back in the day that you had to dig wells by hand. It goes on to say, in ancient times, there was abundant water, but we had to find it. Abundance of water spring was part of God's original creation. He provided always. He provided. Goes on to say, the Jordan River Valley is compared to the land of Egypt, where annual flooding of the Nile River makes the land fertile. It was fertile, good for growing. It was fertile. It goes on to say the town of Zoar is about 64 miles from where Lot and Abram were standing. The town displayed an important role for Lot and his family when the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. The reference to the destruction of these cities suggests that this event was widely known among the original audience of Genesis. Lot initially seemed to have chosen the most favorable land for selfish reasons. See, that's what happens. It looked good to Lot, but it was going to be a downfall. He goes on to say, it did not ultimately lead to a positive outcome for him. In other words, he made the wrong choice by greed, selfishness. Verse 11 talks about his selection. Then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves the one from the other. As Lot stood next to his uncle, he undoubtedly thought he had the better deal regarding the choice of land. But as the events of Genesis 18 and 19 unfold, he may have come to realize how poor his choice was. Lot selected territory means that he will be moving east. And in this general narrative, traveling to the east had been associated with moves away from God. Pastor, we talked about that when we was talking about way graves should be turned. The symbol east means that you're turning your back on God. Am I right?
The symbol east, I'm not, yeah. I gotta take it.
Yeah.
You turning your back on God?
In the Genesis narrative, traveling to the east has been associated with moves away from God. Listen. First, Adam and Eve were driven eastward from the garden.
Right, okay. I got you.
Genesis 3:24. Next, Cain moved east to the land of Nod,
Okay.
and from the presence of the Lord. As I studied this, I got to thinking. Maybe not turning your back, but you're turning away from him versus turning toward him. Finally, the builders of the city of Babel are reported to have an eastward orientation or destination. Genesis 11 and 2. So when they turned eastward, when Lot did, he was sort of giving up on God. This is what verse 12 says. Abram dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain, and pitted his tent towards Sodom. You see, Lot's departure to the cities of the plain identifies his new home as being just barely inside the land of Canaan. The phrase pitch his tent points to a nomadic lifestyle. Isaiah 18 and 20. The Hebrew preposition of the verse at hand celebrates his action as being towards Sodom. Soon enough, however, the preposition changes. He is described as living in Sodom. Genesis 14 and 12. And then we look at 13, his environment. This is what it says. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. In selecting where to live, Lot had apparently not considered the moral climate. He had not considered the moral climate, only the availability of water. And that moral climate was so much wickedness in Sodom. We know what was going on. Men were with men. Women were with women. And it grieved the Lord of that lifestyle, quite natural. Specific information regarding the nature and the depravity of the men of Sodom is found in Genesis 19, 4 and 5, and Ezekiel 16, 49 and 50. You see, Lot's decision to live near Sodom was one such poor choice. It opened the door to destructive people and influences. Sodom. The Apostle Paul, quoting the Greek, reminds us to be not deceived. Evil communications corrupt good manners. 1 Corinthians 15 and 33. Did you have something to say?
Not really, but, I'm just still trying to figure out why there was so much focus on Lot in the story. The title is transitioning, and in this lesson that we're talking about is Abraham transitioning, not so much as Lot. I was just telling you about what happened in the process of Lot and Abraham separating. I mean, it was too much. Abraham came out of Egypt. He had a lot. He was just trying to stop. Him and Lot didn't have any problems. He was just trying to stop their herdmen from having issues. And me and Pastor was just talking about how God allowed things to happen. So, and just a little bit of my concept of reading the story, God allowed the herdmen to have differences so he could separate Abraham from Lot, because he had to move Isaac again here sooner or later. But I'm not knocking the lesson. I'm just saying it's just a whole lot of emphasis on what is going on with Lot and not Abraham, which is the one that we should be talking about.
This is what Genesis 3:24 says this. Thus God expelled him and placed mighty angels at the east of the Garden of Eden, with a flaming sword to guard the entrance to the tree of life. I dug in this pretty deep. Thus God expelled him and placed mighty angels at the east of the Garden of Eden, with a flaming sword to guard the entrance to the tree of life. God did that. God did that. The east. It's something about it. Next moved east to the land of Nod, out from the presence of the Lord. Four and 16 says this. And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. That's what it was trying to convey, eastward. Finally, the builders of the city of Babel are reported to have an eastward orientation or destination. That's how they're trying to tie it in here. Eastward. If you read the whole chapters 18 and 19 in Genesis, it explains it quite a bit. So, a man was telling me, and I thought me and Pastor were talking about when you dig graves, the head is going to be the opposite of the east, because is that what we were talking about?
Not opposite.
Yeah, facing
It's facing east.
Facing east. Okay, that's what I mean. Facing east, yeah. Facing east.
looking toward that.
That's what it's going to turn.
Faith, yeah. But this is just implying that by moving east, Lot selected territory means that he will be moving east. Now that's Lot, that's not Abram. That's Lot. That's Lot.
Again, he gave him the choice. I don't want to get ahead of the story, but he was humble in all the decisions anyway. But I'll let you go on, because like I said, it's no big deal. I just wanted to thinking about why there was so much emphasis on Lot and not on Abraham in the decisions that he made to make sure that there was no strife.
Well, it refers to Lot following that Abram let Lot influence him when he knew better. That's what caused the problem later on. Following, because it was given to Abram, and he was influenced by a nephew, Lot. Influence. We're going to go on to verse 14, 15. And the Lord said unto Abram. After that Lot was separated from him. Lift up now thine eyes and look from the place where thou art northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land which thou seest, to thee I will give it, and to thy seed forever. That's the Lord talking to Abram. You see, with Abram alone, God made a more expansive promise of territory in the land of Canaan. When God invites Abram to look northward and southward and eastward and westward, that man can see as far as 66 miles in any direction. If we imagine Abram standing in the middle of a circle with a visibility radius of 66 miles, the result is Abram potentially being able to view about 13,700 square miles, potentially being able to view a third of the state of Tennessee. We also note the second mention of Abram's seed. The word seed is often used as a collective singular noun to refer to a line of descendants, but it can also be used of an individual. Isaac would become this seed to Abram, the child of promise from God. Then 16 talks about, I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. Here the word seed is used as a collective noun, standing for the enormous number of Abraham's future family. Goes on to say, if the dust of the earth could be counted, and it can't, then Abraham's future descendants could be counted as well, and they can't either. You should keep in mind that at this point, childish Abraham is 75 years old. 75 years old. Then we're going to look at Abram's tour. He received the directive. 17 says, arise, walk through the land in the length of it and in the breadth of it, for I will give it unto thee. In the ancient world, walking the length and breadth of a land was equivalent to claiming ownership of it. Therefore, in accordance with legal tradition, God instructed Abram to survey the land by walking through it. Then our found verse talks about the response by building. It says, then Abram removed his tent and came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto the Lord. And this is what Abraham is doing, and thanks to God. He said Abraham responded to the directive and chose to live about 30 miles southward of his location of Bethel, stated in Genesis 13:3. The elevation of Hebron allows views of Sodom and Gomorrah and Zoar. Perhaps Abram chose this location to keep an eye on Lot. Perhaps he chose to keep an eye on Lot. In gratitude for God's provision and attention, Abram constructed an altar to offer sacrifices and worship. Goes on to say, Abraham and his wife Sarah were buried in a cave near their home in Mamre, Genesis 23:17. And finally, in conclusion, God's first words to Abraham as Abram were a directive to leave home. He left his extended family behind as he journeyed toward and within the land of God had designated. God deliberately separated him from his past to create a new nation from him, a nation to usher in the Messiah. We may wonder how homesick Abraham might have become from time to time. We may also wonder if Abraham ever wished he hadn't taken Lot along. Lot the one got him in the trouble he got in. In Hebrew 11, Abraham is enshrined in Faith Hall of Fame. His example has much to teach us yet today. In a sense, Abraham's story is ours as well. God wants us to know the Messiah that he has sent. But for that to happen, sometimes God has to separate us from relationships, events, jobs, etc. that stand in the way. Those separations may come either in order that we may know Jesus or as a result of knowing him. Those who have experienced such separation may have an inkling of Abraham's faith. He willingly to place our faith in God before all else matters, stand apart a hero of faith, Abraham. God expects similar faith even today. When we believe we are called to a different situation, God may not reveal all the details of how to do so and why. If he did, there would be no room for faith. We should not be surprised if our journey involves taking a lot alone. Listen to me. We should not be surprised if our journey involves taking a lot, in quotation, alone. You got to be careful who you associate with. Lot was his downfall, caused him a lot of pain. In the generous narrative, that man was nothing but trouble for his uncle. More importantly, it's vital that we not be a Lot. It's important that we may not be a Lot.
See, kind of got a controversy about that. And the reason I say this is because Lot, Abraham loved Lot.
Yeah.
He loved Lot so much that's why he took it with him. You know, he didn't have no dad. But on the other hand of it, the trouble that they said that he bought, that was just trouble. That was just Lot's trouble. God separated Lot from Abraham. He put him up on that hill so he could see what was going on in Sodom and Gomorrah. I'm going to destroy this land. And Abraham, he didn't ask for a lot to be saved, but he asked if he just found one righteous man in there, would you not destroy the city? And he said, well, Abraham, I tell you what, I'm just going to send my angels down here. You're not going, I'm going to send my angels down here. We're going to go get Lot. And they bought Lot out of it. And then if you go back and read, I think it's 2 Peter, Peter talks about Lot being a righteous man that was saved, just like Noah was. So, I mean, when you start looking at this, all this right here in conclusion has something to do with separation, which is what you talked about. Lot was in the way of Isaac. He had to be moved because as soon as, if you keep reading, as soon as Lot was separated from Abraham, then Isaac came on the scene.
God loves us all, but we still make mistakes.
Yeah,
It didn't say he didn't love it. Didn't say that Abraham didn't love his nephew. It did not say that.
It implies
But it's all about pleasing God. It's all about pleasing God.
That's right.
He loves each of us, but we still accountable.
Yeah.
Didn't say he didn't love him.
But he said that he was trouble to him. I don't think he was trouble to him. He loved him so much that God had to move him out the way, because if he didn't move him out the way, he couldn't allow his promise to come in. Go ahead, Pastor.
He takes people out of our lives sometimes to save us.
That's right.
And that's what was happening here. Lot, that's biblical. I ain't got time to break it down. Lot cost. That's why Lot's wife had to suffer, because he had told her,
That's right.
don't look back. Told her, don't look back. Turn to her and said, go ahead, Pastor.
No. In life, here Lot and Abraham, like I said, the families that started squabbling. And I think the message here is that we should get along.
That's right.
But if we can't, you go left, and I go right. Well, that's what happened here. But out of love, out of Abraham's love, for example, his nephew, he still he was concerned about it in the situation he in.
Yeah.
All right, the choices we make, sometimes we're gonna make by eye candy.
That's
It's gonna
right.
look good,
That's right.
and here, that was Lot's problem. And it tells us a message, even though we may not be so unrighteous, but we got to watch where our eye
Yes,
senses
sir.
takes us. Everything look good ain't good. And then what we gotta see here is in Lot's, in Abraham's love for Lot, he pleaded for God to spare the city, which Lot was in. Well, Lot made a choice to follow Abraham. And I think the message here is with us. A lot of people are making choices right now to stand in your shadows.
That's right.
Because God is blessing you,
That's right.
and they want to be covered by his arms. Sort of like Lot. But Lot's family was instructed, don't look back. Don't look back.
Lot knew not to,
He knew not to as well as his wife.
but she chose.
But she chose to go back and wonder what she left behind. Look back and the punishment. But God in all, let's don't sort of get tied up in too much of the what God, where we are leaning on is the message which God is trying to tell us, instead of where the emphasis on where the lesson is actually putting the emphasis on.
Right.
So God wants us to get along no matter where we are.
Yes,
But
sir.
if we don't, sometimes separation.
Yes, sir.
But we got to make the right decisions.
That's all I've been talking about
That's right.
with that. Listen, and we out of time. I said it a while ago. He wants a relationship with us to know the Messiah that he has sent. But for that to happen, sometimes God has to separate us from relationships, events, jobs, etc. that stands in the way. Like Abram sort of got a little bit away from that. That's why it cost him. Then if you go to Mark 10, 28 through 31, it talks about it. To separate yourself is going to cost you. It's going to cost you. But it says here, let me assure you that no one has ever given up anything, home, brothers, sisters, mother, father, for love of me and to tell others the good news, who won't be given back 100 times over. Sometimes we got to sacrifice. Sometimes we got to give up something. Sometimes we got to do that. We got to separate ourselves. We out of time. We're going to offer motion. We got Sunday school minutes. All in favor say aye. Opposed have the same right.